The Webster Report.
A Christian should never surrender discernment to another human being. Not to a pastor, not to a scholar, not to a prophet, not to a church institution, not even to someone whose teaching has helped them before. Be like the Bereans. They received Paul's preaching eagerly, but then searched the scriptures every day to see whether what he said was true. Paul was an apostle, yet Scripture praises the people who tested his words. That should settle the matter. Every man and woman is born into sin. Every mind can be influenced by pride, fear, tradition, personal desire, and corrupted understanding. Credentials may prove someone studied. A position may prove someone was appointed. Good fruit may show that God has used them. But none of those things make a person incapable of error. David needed Nathan to confront him. Peter needed Paul to correct him. Apollos needed Priscilla and Aquila to explain the way more accurately. God uses imperfect people, but he never tells us to make imperfect people the final authority. That place belongs to Christ alone. So test the teaching. Read the passage in context. Compare it with the whole testimony of Scripture. Ask whether the reasoning holds together. Examine the fruit it produces. Test the spirit behind it. A faithful teacher should never fear honest examination, and a trustworthy church should never demand blind loyalty. Truth does not become weaker when tested. Falsehood does. Receive instruction with humility, but never abandon the responsibility God gave you to seek truth. No preacher is infallible. No scholar is incorruptible. No institution is beyond examination. Christ is the truth. Scripture is the standard. And every human voice must remain beneath them.
Those who are illegal immigrants will be returned, and it is customary international law for countries to receive their own immigrants back into their country. And if he is, right honorable gentleman is suggesting that we ever get to a position when you cannot return illegal immigrants to their country of origin, then he is proposing international chaos.
Good afternoon, Patriots. Well, this one's going to blow your socks off. I now know why the government doesn't care about the small boats crisis. It's because they want you to focus on it, because what they're doing elsewhere is treasonous. So in Manchester Airport, there is a terminal called Ether, E-T-H-E-R. It's an FBO terminal, which is for rich people, and it's got a nice plush lounge, and they have their private jets there. But the government are flying in 3 to 4 flights a week of 200 to 300 people at night into Ether. And these flights are coming from Middle East and Africa. The people on it are undocumented. They rip their documents up so that when they get to border control, they're automatically allowed through. Now, normally border control would want to look at this, but it isn't border control people there anymore. It is Home Office people. And they are automatically putting them through illegal migrants on the asylum list. So we are getting 1,000 people through in Manchester Airport alone. And if it's only just Manchester Airport, that would be great. But it's not. It's going to be other airports as well. And so that's why the government wants you to focus on the small boats, because there are 1,000 more undocumented illegal migrants coming from Africa and the Middle East, dangerous countries, coming in through Manchester Airport. We have to stop this. We have to have transparency. And thank you to the whistleblower who brought this to our attention yesterday. And look, the Patriots are meeting on Saturday, and we'll discuss this, and we will find ways to stop it. Keep the faith. We will get through this. Good afternoon, Patriots.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to another Webster report on this Sunday, the 23rd of August, 2026. A few videos to start us off with there, Alex, because it's, you know, things are hotting up, as in civil unrest. People are starting to get agitated, and they're all looking at various things. Are we being told to look at certain things whilst other things are happening, mate?
Yeah, I think distraction is always, I mean, it's a big world, and there's a lot of stuff going on. And of course, we know with most purported magic tricks, they're really sleight of hand and misdirection. So that the art of that trick is to give the impression to perception that one thing is going on, meanwhile something else is going on, and that's the nature of the trick. So obviously people with an agenda and power and influence will attempt to secure their interests, and they'll do it even in the face of the machinery. And the thing is, the machinery might be geared up called democracies if it's serving particular, you know, freedom-based, liberty-based ideas that are in the best interests of the whole populace. Now, if the people with the agenda understand that the people will not welcome what the plan is, they must create the impression of what's happening, and they must misdirect attention away from the things that they're doing towards other things. This is what Andy Burnham classically is doing by giving attention to all these so-called cosmetic things, £2 buzz fares, other things. It's clearly, to anybody with a brain who's lived more than 2 minutes, superficial. But of course, that's what we've inherited now with politics. I mean, it's interesting that you had Margaret Thatcher on, and we talked about her last week, and regards about what you think of her policies. If you look at the substance and character and qualities of the individuals involved, you compare Margaret Thatcher to Andy Burnham, and yet Andy Burnham would win some kind of popularity sweepstakes compared to Margaret Thatcher, who would be, you know, perennially unpopular. You know, it was all that ding dong, the witch is dead when she died, the vitriol was incredible. And it's not even about whether you agree with her policies or not. You could profoundly disagree with them, but you could see that this was a person who really did stand up for what she believed in, and that she was the one, in many ways, who was driving things forward. A bit like, for a long time at least, Trump appeared to be. It was Trump's agenda, Trump's policies, rather than somebody pulling the strings. Now, you might latterly question what's been going on with Trump, whether he really is still pulling the strings, and whether there's been like a transfer of power. But at his peak, when he was less popular and less established, it was very much Trump's the man, Trump's dictating the policy. Opposite to Biden, who was clearly a system stooge. All other politicians in America were just system stooges. So I think comparing it to the UK, probably since Thatcher, every politician has been a system stooge who's got anywhere near power anyway.
You just mentioned about how Andy Burnham distracts. He was quoted in the media as that the reason fuel prices are increasing in this country is due to Trump's war on Iran. But he seems to forget that he allowed those attacks to happen from British army bases. So is it Trump's war if we're allowing them to operate from our bases? It's the same with Russia. We seem to be at war without actually saying we're at war.
Yes, that's exactly what's happened. We've effectively used Ukraine as a proxy for our own agenda. That's why we welcome Zelensky so much, and this is why Andy Burnham makes all these saber-rattling statements of full support for Ukraine, and he doesn't really seem to care much. Well, it's not him, is it? This is the point. It's so obvious with Andy Burnham. He's just a shell. He's an empty shell.
It just seems strange, doesn't it, that we can go back to, nearly 50 years to where Thatcher comes into government, and she's saying things like what we've just heard that has a lot of pertinent meaning now, 40 years later. You mentioned about being popular, but she's talking about things that we know that these agendas have been tried a couple of times since the end of World War II. When we saw the education system come in, when we saw entertainment take over, when America was like, it was the golden dream, wasn't it? You can go to America and do whatever you fulfill your dreams. And all that abundance, it was like all that, they actually believed, we were indoctrinated, we all believed it. And now, if we just look at this from Margaret Thatcher, how does it tie into where we're at now?
We must be alert to the dangers of over-regulation and creeping control, which many number of fashionable and politically correct agendas demand, and which any variety of power-hungry politicians will eagerly supply. All this is necessary, but equally, all this is not enough. Not enough to bring Conservatives back to power.
So she's on about bringing Conservatives back to power. That's 1997. But the agendas that she's talking about, Alex, those have been implemented by New Labour that she took part of a bit of a prideful thing in helping to create, be either lowering their own party so that Labour was a shoo-in. I mean, let's be honest, we go from Thatcher to people like, John Major, who's more peas normer, very grey, very bland, didn't really do anything, but those are the dangerous ones. He was the interim. What happened then was nobody wanted Conservatives, so we had to go to Labour. And then Labour has done exactly the same thing until the Conservatives come back in. They pass the baton back again, and here we are. We're still in this circular loop and argument that people think we can vote out of. It was interesting because a fella I'd known a long time was talking about people not voting is why we're in this. People need to get involved and at local levels and stuff. Is that not a bit of a fantasy by now, Alex? Is there any possibility that you could ever get back to where that system, if everybody interacted, would work? Just like the debt-based economy, we would have flattened the debt a long time ago if people had stopped paying bills and set them off acting correctly. We would have flattened the debt, we would have been prosperous, but being groomed into acting as we have, being groomed into registering property that now becomes a commercial asset under a hereditament that is incorrectly defined as your house. And you have people who argue that a commercial tax can apply to that private house that has no commercial aspect. People will argue that a non-domestic tax can apply to a property that has no revenue coming through it. Now, that's just like, there's no common sense at all, first off, in that. But who's trying to read this legislation? You know, we talk about when we read the Bible and let the Bible interpret what it says. We don't need to read into it. So do the same with the legislation. What does it say? Let it tell you, because it'll tell you the truth. And the factor is all the terminology. Even if we go back to a lawyer in the 1700s using it for a private house in one court case, the attachments that hereditament word, and therefore all the commercial aspects that is related to it, and because of how we act, as in registering, and the title being clouded, it sets up a fertile ground for joint enterprise in fraud. Yet people want to argue about that. And then people want to argue about the likes of Burnham saying the reason that you're paying more money and I'm giving you £2 bus fares is because of Trump. Nothing to do with me allowing him to attack Iran from our bases. Nothing at all. Nothing to do with me handing money over to Zelensky in the Ukraine to keep this war with Russia going. And Russia, you know, all this is a melting pot or a powder keg. Which is it? Because it's bubbling away, but there's a fuse lit somewhere. So when we start to think about where this goes, I think we've got to be honest and, you know, look at history and see where places that are in the positions that we're in now with an economy, with citizens who are arguing amongst each other, where you've got illegal migration coming in and it could be stopped, but it isn't being stopped. So there's a reason for that. What is it? It's to decimate a culture, decimate a heritage. There's no two ways about it. How can we vote our ways out of this?
We can't. And it's a bit nuanced because there are three ideas. Agency is a central one, the power that we have to act. And basically, when that gets, you know, deranged over time, we become apathetic because we sense that we have no power to change things. That's very disillusioning. That's not all there is to agency, but it becomes in the political domain with significant decisions. We kind of go, well, I can't change anything because the government make those decisions and enact them. The problem is, so you've got agency, and then you've got this sort of derangement into apathy. The next stage is victimhood. When people become apathetic over time, it's much easier to make them feel like victims. And what that really means is, you know, things happen in the world that are happening to them and they can't do anything about it. And then if those things that are happening to them are negative and harmful and create problems, it's difficult to avoid a victim mentality. You know, when you look at tribalism and identity politics and so on, and all the issues and all the polarity that's artificially manufactured, and media does this and they set up all these scam debates that are very black and white, it's lulling people into the position where the only agency that they've got is holding an opinion. Holding an opinion, which is essentially a statement of powerlessness. You know, the louder people shout, the more powerless they are. The powerful go silent and just do what they want anyway. So the real difficulty with not voting, for example, is not because people, by voting, have overcome some naive belief. It's because if you don't vote, even if it's not going to make a difference, you're adding to your own apathy. Even if it makes no difference, you have to exercise agency in voting. And if you exercise the agency to vote, you've got the ability to have a passion to want something to change, even if that system doesn't change anything. So once people stop voting, it's an evidence of apathy, even though the voting doesn't change anything. The next step or the next station on the railway line from apathy is victimhood. And all the tribal stuff that we see is about setting people up against the opposite side to just have opinions and then attack the opinions of the opposite side. Because like we said last week, people develop identity investments. The problem with that is that really is homemaking, because everybody ends up arguing these principles about these very important moral topics. This is why the left are a bunch of lunatics, particularly about, asylum seekers, coming back to that topic. Yet none of them, including that deputy, leader of the Green Party, they're all for asylum seekers and migrants until they're going to live near them. They'll not take any into the house. So you see, this is again, they can live in some Westminster bubble or some privileged bubble. And then Andy Burnham says, well, actually, and this is how dumb people are. Andy Burnham will address the migrant crisis and say, yes, we understand it's very important for us to distribute these migrants more fairly. So I've got a number 10 of the North, and I'm passionate about the North. It's really unfair that so many migrants are being placed up north. So we're going to bring even more in, and we're going to send them down south. So the south are going to get just as many as the north. And it's like, and people are supposed to be in the north are supposed to be comforted. Oh, that's great. The problem is the migration. And he's actually revealing the agenda there. Yeah, we're going to bring more in. We're not going to stop, but we'll actually spread them out more across the country. And people are supposed to listen to that and go, oh, that's brilliant news. So when it gets to that level of stupidity, an open, flagrant statement that he can make, you know that we've got a problem. But people, again, are passive because they become apathetic, and now they've become close to victim status, and they just argue with other people about who's the victim. And if it's me, I can complain about it.
So I think we're in that position where society's soft, men are soft. There's nobody to defend or fight any of this. If you go back and look at the likes of the Peterloo massacre, where they sent the army in, battle-hardened veterans in against people who knew that getting cheaper stuff in from outside was against their wages, how it was putting everybody into poverty. The only time that this will change is when people stop work. But you can't get people to do that. At the moment, Alex, you look at it yourself, you've looked at the jobs. I know people who are actually programming AI, and they've told me, I know that I'm programming myself out of a job. I'll be obsolete once all this programming is done. 85% of all jobs are going to be taken over. This is what they want to do. Well, what happens to all the rest of us? Well, if they've got all the infrastructure in place and we're locked down, well, that's going to be a different kettle of wotsits as to where we're at now. But there's never been any changes until people say no. And I think we've got, as you just said, about people arguing amongst each other, I think that's better. And that's what the ideologies have done. They've split everything up. There's no truth. When we have no truth, this is the mess that we end up in. But if we're looking at boats, this week as well, there's shall we say, a video that seems to have been taken specially for us of the French police slashing a dinghy as immigrants try to get across the channel. So they slash it to stop them. Now, we know that that's not happening, but what if we're watching them now stop the boats? What if Burnham starts saying, see, we're stopping the boats? But what if they're landing at Manchester Airport in the Posh Lounge?
Yeah.
We think we've won something, and yet you're in a street that's just not surrounded with people that you grew up with anymore. Everybody's moved away. There's a different culture. Goats are being barbecued in the street. All this kind of stuff that's started to go on. That's a cultural change. That's got nothing to do with religions, Alex. We're going to point at people and start talking about religion. It really is a massive mess. But these things that are going on, this war with Russia, you sent a video that I'm going to play 5 minutes of now, because we're in such a place now. Taylor's mentioned it many times about Wag the Dog. We're going to be told what this stuff is happening, and now when you start getting brought in and you're experiencing this stuff, well, you know, where does it end?
Yeah.
Okay, buckle up, because the dominoes are stacked for this absolutely huge event that is coming. And no, this is not clickbait. Everything I'm going to tell you today is 100% true. You can check any of this for yourself from the official government website. So welcome to the Walk and Talk today, ladies and gentlemen, where you may have noticed all of these different preparedness stories, whether it's from the media or whether it was from the government, that has been announced right through the summer as we're going through. But even since last year, a lot of it was war related, other parts was energy, it was food, it was all sorts of different things. And when you look at them all separately, it's very easy to just brush them under the carpet and think that they're not really relevant. But it's only when you put all of this together and you join the dots that you see just how serious everything is becoming. And it was back in 2020 that I made my forecast for 2027, and I gotta say, it's not looking good for 2027. I'll say that, and we'll get into exactly why on this lovely Walk and Talk. Today we're on the Isle of Man. So my first question for you today then would be, have you heard of Operation Albiston Shadow? Probably not. I'd say most people have not heard of this.
Breaking news, the UK will hold its largest home defence exercise in decades next year to better prepare the whole country for the possibility of war.
And I thought the name was quite fitting, somewhat of a dark shadow hanging over predominantly Britain, the UK, but this will obviously pull in Europe, it will pull in NATO as well. So none of this is positive. But this was kind of kept fairly secret. No one really knew about this operation until it was broken by a reporter. But before we get into all of that, it's probably important I start with some context, because at the end of my live stream last night or yesterday, or whatever time it was for you watching it, I talked about how Russia has now openly, this is not closed doors anymore, they've openly threatened the UK. And I'll tell you specifically what they said. They said, and I quote here, there's consequences coming for the UK for which it will have to answer. And this all came about because of the advanced British drones that have been used to strike deep into Russia. I mean, very, very deep. Energy infrastructure. They're even saying it's been hitting civilian infrastructure. So this is the sort of background to that statement. So again, there's a lot of context, background as we get into all of this. But Russia's openly stated, as I walk down the rocks here, that they consider this an act of war by Britain supplying these drones. And they also consider it acts of terrorism, because they claim that Ukraine has used these drones to attack civilian infrastructure. So they consider Britain to be complicit in these crimes. And the UK government, when asked for a comment on the civilian infrastructure aspect, said that they declined to comment. That's never a good sign for a start. But Andy Burnham actually came out and said that he didn't want to answer parts of the question, but he said that the UK is going to continue to fully 100% support Ukraine and send these advanced drones. In fact, he said there's more coming. 150,000 just in the next few months will be delivered to Ukraine. Now, you think the damage that one of these things can do with a pretty serious payload. So you think what one of them can do. Now think about 150,000. You can kind of see the scale of what is going on here. It's pretty serious. So it really does, however you look at it, it either throws the British public in at the deep end or it throws them under the bus, either way. But I think that explains this Operation Albiston Shadow and why they are preparing for this. And it's actually the biggest operation since World War II. It's even bigger than all the operations and plans that they made during the Cold War. In fact, to give you the specifics on it, this is the largest national home defense exercise the country has ever run, bigger than anything at the height of the Cold War, and only World War II, at the height of the Blitz, exceeds this new operation for which the British public will be involved.
So we're going to be involved, Alex. We're going to be into war. Not people really knowing it. Music, by the way. Alex. Hello? What's happening on me for a second? I don't know what's happening, Alex. So there's going to be manoeuvres and people are going to get involved. Now we know that the armed forces aren't massive, you know, we've done a lot of cuts there, not really a lot of things, but where does this leave us? Because obviously, you know, this is going to be like Dad's army type stuff, but the putting into people's heads that we're going to be under attack, and I think, you know, we've got to start taking this stuff quite seriously now. Alex, you muted. Well, we always have these tech issues. That's actually before. Come on, see if we can get him back in.
Yeah, you were breaking up a bit there. I couldn't hear much of what was said after the video.
You're on mute. I've been talking to you.
I could hear you, but you sounded garbled. So all I could hear was like a computerized tinny noise. I don't know what was going on there, but yeah, I mean, the thing about that it is a declaration of war. I mean, it was obvious. You know, if we're supplying drones, there's no way Ukraine could manufacture all their own infrastructure. So they're relying on people, you know, sending it in. Now, you know, in terms of selling stuff, if people buy and sell and it's trade, well, arms trade happens all over the place. But it's the statements that Andy Burnham makes, not just the fact that it goes on everywhere. He says, no, we're going to fully support. In other words, yeah, it's Ukraine that's doing this, but really, it's us. We're supplying the. So Burnham's basically saying it's a proxy war. We're at war with Russia through Ukraine, and of course, Russia are not stupid. They understand that, because the only reason that the war is ongoing is because these external parties in the West keep propping Ukraine up. That was the big thing about Trump when he pulled out. He made it very clear that he wasn't going to get involved at that level. Of course, that had been happening under Biden. The whole of the West had been against Russia and China. Now, of course, Trump's changed his attentions, moved them elsewhere, because he sees China in particular as a bigger threat, and he wants to deal with the Middle East, you know, to his own purposes, strategically speaking. But the rest of the West have continued, and particularly Britain have doubled down on Russia. Well, that's a massive mistake militarily. The whole of Europe can't compete with Russia, so never mind the UK. And we've got serious problems. I don't think that they will attack in a classic sense. It'll be cyber war and other things. They'll attack us in different ways, but it's still very perilous. And this is, unfortunately, we call him a leader, but he's a puppet. This is the policy. It's the old British Empire policy. It's not gone anywhere. City of London, and they're going to do what they're going to do.
Do you know what? I don't know how it is you get through to people, Alex, because people have got an angle on a lot of this stuff, but it's all individuals, and all of this has got to come together to actually be able to see this bigger picture. I mean, are people really going to be cajoled into a war? They were cajoled into experimental vaccines. You know, people now, the people who are vaccinated are telling people who are unvaccinated that they don't need to keep going on about it. You know, we were fortunate to not get jabbed. You know, I know people who went through the ringer in order to not get jabbed and against these idiotic things. And we're getting just the same thing now, aren't we?
We always come back to this issue. On whatever level that you see it, I was talking last week about, you know, Australians in particular in you know, regarding the bird flu issue, which now apparently they've started this vaccination program, and now apparently it's transmitted to a seal, the first mammal. And you just think, well, I'm not really sure what we can do here. If people can't see through this utter rubbish, but they can't, they don't want to. So there's still a significant proportion of population who simply want to believe everything that they're told. There's still too many of them enabling the narrative to be propped up. I mean, no matter how ludicrous it gets, it's utterly ludicrous. But you have people saying, you know, cheering, whooping, yeah, get all those birds vaccinated. It was a vaccine, I found out after last week, that was designed, I think, specifically for chickens, that's being injected into every kind of bird you can imagine. Still there, Paul? Ground control to major.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. I'm trying to fix some of these things in the background. I've had to chat because Paul's saying my chat's off, but according to the live feed, it played out. So just let me know, Alex, if none of these videos are sounding. Don't let me sit through a silence like you did last week.
Yeah, I won't.
But it's come through there. But now we're seeing everything that's getting weaponized. We're seeing, with these data centers, the water, we're seeing the digital ID system already implemented. We're seeing distraction with migrants. You know, are we fighting against each other for nothing? Is it all a psyop, or is there actually things moving? Well, both are true. You know, it's only when it starts knocking on your door that people are starting. You know, we saw that one of the Labour candidates last week, she was all for more migration until they're now going into her constituency. Now she doesn't want them. Well, until people turn round, and the people who are in these systems, the people who run the infrastructure, without transporting stuff, if all that stops, we would be able to sit it out, but it's going to cause issues. It's going to cause pressure, Alex, for people who are already, you know, buckling under it. I don't know. You know, what's the alternative to this? I think we've just got to watch this play out, but people are going to react, and they know what buttons to press, and people aren't just going to step out the front door and articulate things, are they?
The difficulty is that at that scale we can't influence, and that's what I was saying before about agency, apathy, and victim status. Once people feel disempowered, after a while, they'll start to become radicalized, because they'll see what's happening. They'll see that they have no control over things that are being done to them, and especially when they see it escalate. Now, you could say that this is being done to provoke people, or they've just realised, well, we're doing it anyway. We can say whatever we like in the media. I mean, it's a really good example, this bird flu rubbish in Australia. It's laughable. I would encourage anybody who wants training in media to watch all the Australian stuff. If you don't get it through on your Facebook feed, for example, start seeking it out. It's so it's so puerile, it's so basic, but it's like that because unfortunately it still works. So the thing about it is, if we identify the issue as agency, it's like going right back to the beginning, the first reel that you played. That was Christian reel. So we've got truth, but if we don't ground truth in something, how do we know what the bedrock is of truth? Well, people will have, and we had some debate last week on the chat about the nature of God, and one person, I don't know if they're in the chat again and watching, Mr. Ramones, effectively, and has continued on the YouTube afterwards after the show, maintaining that God is unitary and that Jesus was just a man, even though he was Messiah and he was God's appointed Messiah. Jesus isn't God. So basically, when we get into the God arguments, the nature of God, like I said last week, we're into metaphysical speculation. Even the truth is a metaphysical speculation if it's not proven. And all the false positions are metaphysical speculation. So what they have in common is more important than what separates them. Truth and falsehood, completely different, but they're all forms of metaphysical speculation from where we're stood on our side of the line. It's narrative. The only thing we can look at is the human condition, which makes all the claims about God. And one of the claims that the narrative makes about the human condition in Genesis is that man is made in the image of God, which means he reflects a lot of his characteristics and attributes. There is some correlation, but in order for that image to remain intact, it must be a faithful representation of what God is like. In that sense, Jesus wasn't made in the image of God. Jesus was the image of God. So he is the perfect template of godness in human form. And so he's the standard. And the Apostle Paul calls him the second Adam. If you like, the first Adam made in the image of God, and that template got corrupted. So then God comes in human form, and Jesus is the human who is the image of the invisible God. So, ultimately, that had to be restored. The template had to be, it had become corrupted, it had been turned upside down, and it had to be set the right way up again. And setting the right way up, as far as Jesus was concerned, was he came to serve. He didn't consider equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking on the form of a servant, submitted himself to God in baptism. And if we take that seriously, that Jesus was the recapitulation of the image of God, then we have to take his whole life and ministry, all his suffering, all his crucifixion, as fulfilling the reality of what it's like to be in a world such as this. So what that means is the image of God in man is what we would describe as an anthropology. And what that's telling us, if we have a theological anthropology, is that believers are going to be persecuted. It's part of this, not the show that we're on, the shit show called life as it is, and all the corruptions and all the problems. Jesus came into that, the God-man, and encountered all of that, all the flack, ultimately was crucified through it. After death, resurrected beyond it with a new body, and has escaped death and liberated us from that when we're aligned with him. So essentially, before that happens, while we're in this earthbound state, we are going to have, if we're in the image, we're going to have all this suffering. We're going to have all these problems. We're going to have all these challenges. And those people who try and inoculate themselves from that pain, who stick their head in the sand like a proverbial ostrich, who keep, playing the instrument on the Titanic, even though it wasn't the Titanic, when it went down, rearranging the deck chairs, there are going to be a lot of people doing that. But for those of us who are not, there is a critical, there's a crisis facing us. But the one thing that we've got is agency. We can do stuff. So, and you can live your life no matter what's going on all around you. So the most important thing for all of us is to continue to live that life fearlessly, and I would say trusting in God, because what else is there to trust in? It's something that we have no control over. It's something that we can see happening when we're aware of the truth. So what do? You submit to God, you live right, you speak right, you act right with respect to others, and you attempt to be the light of the world. But that light is being snuffed out constantly, and the churches often have become corrupted. And it's not just false doctrines and so on. It's lifestyle issues. It's lack of awareness, lack of discernment, and it all comes back to this restoration of the image of God in human beings. If we're not aligned properly, then we're going to be all over the place, and we're going to try and get compensations, play the identity game, play the victim, play woe is me. But ultimately, if you're an adult, you've got to look in the mirror and say, even if it's bad, what am I doing? What am I doing to make my life as sane as possible? What am I doing to maintain humanity in the way it should be maintained? Well, we need a standard. We need a rock that we can build on. And we're being buffeted. And so the question is, in your anthropology, in your personal anthropology, you're listening to the show, your humanness, what's anchoring you? What's going to keep you stable in the storm? What's going to keep your ship afloat in the middle of all this?
Where do we fit in with it all then? Because, at some point, there's got to be a line that's going to be drawn. Now, it depends on how far down the road they're going to get with all this. We're seeing all this corporate stuff where people are arguing with each other about contracts over council tax and utility bills, and there's nothing to do with contracts here. This has all been commercialised. Everything has to be in commercial jurisdiction, otherwise none of it will apply. They won't have any authority. How do they do that? We've been groomed into acting as a debtor in a debt-based economy, whilst parroting we're creditors. Yet the way we registered things and the way the registration is set up, the titles don't show the actual use of what has been registered. So especially if it's linked with the all caps name, which is your monopoly piece to participate in whenever you use commerce, setting up a business. If I open a shop, I don't have to contract with anybody to be able to have to pay business rates. The council will say, pay your business rates, and that outbuilding at the back, we want council tax for that because that could be part of your business. Or that lock-up down the road, that could be part of your business as well. So council tax will apply to them, their hereditaments, their business assets. But you registered a house. Well, the title doesn't say whether it's commercial or it's private. So when any of these properties are going into case management that we struggle to get access to, it's already decided it's commercial. But they don't tell you that. And it's the same with utilities. If you open a shop, the utility company doesn't supply you with anything. All they do is they collect revenue off you on behalf of the taxpayer, and they get paid for that. Problem is, people at home who don't run businesses are being treated as customers, as debtors, and they're acting as that because they're paying, and everybody pays. So the presumption of this, and you can't get through to some people who believe they know what the truth is. It's so simple. If the title's clouded, that's where they're standing. If the title's cleared, what are they standing under? It changes. It changes things, how people are treated, how people are looked at. It's the only way we can start participating back in the system and taking control of that system. Again, once you get control of this system, Alex, you're trillions in debt. That has to be forgiven. It has to be a jubilee as soon as that happens, because none of this can be paid off. It's got to be, right, flatten the books, we'll start again, and we'll negotiate with whatever else we've got. But we've got to be able to start manufacturing. but we're slowly but surely losing grip while we're arguing about bollocks. I have no contract, I'm a man. All that rubbish doesn't matter. It's all, it really is all plain in legislation. There's a remedy in everything. The remedy is if you're in the private and you're not participating, none of that should apply to you. We saw it with the car that Carlo from the People's Shadow Council did, where he attempted to register the vehicle, but he didn't fill in the title name, Mr, Miss, Mrs, and he put it in all lower caps. He received a letter to state, unfortunately, they couldn't register the vehicle, and that could cause issues, as police rely on legislation that relies on the legislation that relies on that registered vehicle. But you can still tax MOT and insure it. Well, that sounds alright. The police can't apply things to me, but I'm legit. I'm taxed, I'm insured, I'm MOT'd. That's called acting correctly. That shows intention. They've got to actively commit fraud against you if they're going to do that. So they didn't. So I thought that that's what they'd do with the joint gyro, but I didn't realise that the judges would be so biased that they would rely on what? Because I've got the remedy. What are they sitting under? They've got to be sitting under the property title. They've got to apply some kind of commerce to this event. If there's no commerce, then they don't have authority. And this is the issue. How do you get the council and Valuations Office Agency both tell you that your house is wholly domestic and yet give you a rating for a non-domestic tax? How do they do that, Alex?
Oh yeah, by hoodwinking.
Hoodwinking and fraud. And you know, people often say legal fraud is a contradiction. It's not. It is legal what they're doing. Council tax is perfectly legal, but it only operates on commerce. If your property has no revenue, you cannot tax something. And if you believe that you can tax somebody who isn't involved in any commerce, I will show you theft. I will show you racketeering. I will show you demanding money with menaces. But we don't live in that society, because as long as everybody's a citizen, everybody's always in commerce. That's why Europe is all under civil law. They're always in commerce. We don't have that here, but they want it here. That's why Andy Burnham wants us back in Europe. We never truly left because of the business contracts that we already had. You know, we have business agreements left, right and centre to keep us, but we wanted to pull out. Was that part of the plan? Did the population do something they hadn't anticipated? I'm not sure. I think we tend to give these people more credit than what they're due, if you pardon the pun.
Mm. Yeah. Well, that's the big Babylon system issue. I mean, so many different ways in which the Great Delusion works, that we talk about quite often. It's got to be perceptual, and like we were saying about smoke and mirrors, is the problem my perception, or is the problem their sleight of hand? Well, it's both, but the sleight of hand works on most people's perception. The problem is, it's not just a magic trick, the whole system is the trick. So the system will fight. It will use every means that it has, including in the courts, the illicit courts. It will fight to maintain that trick, because once the dominoes fall, the game is up. So this is why the closer you get to exposing, that serpent, which is serpentine and hides and is crafty, the force, it will show its teeth, the beast comes out, the dragon appears. So those people that attempt to meet the craftiness and guile of the serpent with craftiness and guile of their own, to bypass the servant, will come up against all illicit means of force that the dragon beast has always used through empires. It will crush.
Yeah, and I can see how that Babylon system is bringing all this to fruition, because, like, as we were saying, that the fuel prices are going up because of wars, but it should be the businesses that are paying those, because our taxes are going up, so we're paying towards that already. When we pay it again, not only do we not balance our own books, plunging us deeper and deeper into debt, but it gives them ultimate control. So when we come to things like fuel, like water and food, all of a sudden we're being treated differently. So we've got to look at how these are now being brought forward and being used against us as weapons.
In 2000, the World Bank forced Bolivia to hand its public water system to a multinational consortium as a condition for economic loans. The company raised water rates by over 50% overnight and passed legislation making it illegal to collect rainwater.
What happened?
The people of Cochabamba formed a unified coalition, shut down the city, and absorbed state violence until the corporate executives fled the country. The privatization collapsed completely.
So the strategy failed because it was visible.
That's exactly what Wall Street took from it. Physical top-down corporate takeover creates a single obvious target. The most effective enclosure is one where the fence is invisible. Instead of buying the pipes, you buy the underlying legal rights, the land, and the financial instruments tied to the resource.
Which is what the water futures market was.
December 2020, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange launched the world's first water futures market, converting water from a public resource into a tradable financial asset for the first time in human history. 1 month after the generative AI boom ignited.
And AI needs water.
Data centers cooling the server clusters that run AI infrastructure consume over 550 million gallons of water every single day. A single hyperscale facility can pull millions of gallons daily. The United Nations projects that by 2030, AI's water footprint will equal the basic annual domestic water needs of 1.3 billion people.
So hedge funds are buying farmland in the American West right now for the water rights attached to it?
They lease the land back to farmers temporarily to keep the water rights legally active. The strategy has a name: buy and dry. When drought conditions peak and AI demand peaks simultaneously, they cut water to the farmland, let the crops die, and sell the redirected water to the highest bidder. A thirsty city, a tech company desperate to keep its servers from melting.
Bolivia fought back because they could see who was taking the water.
This time the taking happens through futures indexes, land deeds, and water rights portfolios. By the time the shortage arrives, the ownership is already 3 layers deep inside a financial instrument nobody's ever heard of.
They learned from Bolivia that visible theft causes revolutions.
So they made the fence invisible.
There we have it. Not placed at the house in front of us. Are actively giving them all this stuff because of how we've been groomed into acting. All of the, Paul in the chat has said legislation's not law, it's company policy. That's all we live in, Paul. That's all they want is company policy. You can see the police have been well taken away from law. They want us in complete civil law. Now, the civil aspect of that is that you're a citizen. So when you are out on the street, it's not private, it's public. You are out in public. This is why they can say you can't stand there. If you stand there too long, we will fine you. It's because they are operating on you being an employee of the company. You've got to come out of that. When you go to work, you use their number, so you can't get away from it. But if you want to agree to a system where you will give people who you put in place to lead, as you mentioned earlier, to run the infrastructure, to bring people in to fix it, to employ people, to run it all for you, and to pay them so much out of your wages, then if you act correctly, everything works. The problem is we don't know how it works. None of us have been bothered with it. We just work hard and pay our bills, and that is now being applied. It's you can't get away from that until you put a stop to it. And going into these courts, we're seeing it now. We're seeing how much they're going to fight for it. We've got some very high-profile court cases going on in the royal courts right now over liability orders. You know, the judges adjourned it, saying there must be a liability order. There must be. Go and find it. Well, there is, but it's a liability order that only operates in commerce. So it's the same as the warrants with no signatures. They are perfectly good warrants, but they only work with shops. Andy Burnham's now said that any household with over £12,000 savings are going to be up for grabs, are going to be up for tax. How can they do that to your private savings? Because you don't have any. It's not your bank account. You rent it. You know, all this stuff of how we've acted has drawn the cage around us. So we can't just argue that you can't do that anymore, because there's enough people that want to do it, and there's also more than enough apathetic who don't want to do anything about anything. And until that is shook up, I don't see how we turn the ship, mate.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's like that holodeck, the Star Trek holodeck again. When you're on a holodeck, you're on a simulation. You become detached from reality, and because collectively we have entered into that agreement, like you said, through inaction and ignorance, but now people are waking up. The momentum is still with the system. People are like on this holodeck, and they're living on this holodeck, and it's very difficult. Then you can't reality test very easily, because the whole system is definitive. And what it does over time, it colonizes everything on the principle that you're talking about, the commerce principle. Because once they contest that people won't push back in fairly small areas, but then it gets bigger and expands, and they still don't push back, then they kind of go, we can do whatever we want here. We can just state anything, and they don't know how to correct it. So I would expect that it's going to get a lot worse. It's almost like it's reaching escape velocity. And you can see it as well beyond that in the narratives on TV. It's like when Ike talks about problem, reaction, solution. It doesn't even need to be a problem now. It's claim there's a problem, reaction, solution. So make any claim you want. Oh yeah, there's bird flu. Oh look, it moved to Australia, it went to this island, all these seals carked it. Oh, it's moving to the Australian mainland. Oh look, we've now found it in a bird. Oh, we found it in another bird. Oh, we've got 300 odd birds. Oh, it's jumped to a seal. And then they get all these official looking people and these stern sounding news reporters very solemnly saying, and now it's moved to the first mammal. And then all you get are two sides debating, half who don't believe it, half who do believe it, but nothing changes. So everyone's watching a movie, and the producers and directors are not us. So the bizarre thing is, we're having an unreality forced upon us now, right across the board. 50% of people are willingly living in it, and 50% of people are unwillingly living in it. Now, that could be sustainable, but obviously eventually the system will overreach beyond the propaganda to start using legislation, action. So now they're vaccinating wildlife, doing whatever they want, and nobody can stop that because it's the government. So they're just doing what they want, that will create other consequences that they desire. Then they'll report those consequences. It's like with weather manipulation. They've been altering the weather to create certain conditions so that they can justify why it's climate change, because there was none. They've got to manufacture it. And then when they manufactured it, there is climate change. And then they just say, see, the story was correct all along. So it just becomes self-perpetuating, and nobody can call the system to account. So we're getting to a stage now where obviously they want to bring more and more oppressive measures in, and they're just doing it. They are doing it. and they're doing it through cover of media and distortions and lies. 50% of the population are buying the Pinocchio game. 50% are not. But those who are not, as long as it's just a game, as long as it's just propaganda and rhetoric, they'll be okay. They'll just keep putting the laugh emojis on the posts. However, once they move from no problem or manufactured problem reaction solution to this is what we're now going to impose on you, people will start losing liberties. So it's at that point that we'll see what happens, because 50% now, I'd say, well, maybe 40% of people are really aware that there's something wrong. If they start trying to oppress them, like if they try to wheel out COVID again, try to do masks again and all those prohibitions, I don't think it would fly. So there's definitely something that's changed, and they're trying new stuff. Same MO, but different expression to try and con people. People are wising up. So it really is a case of how oppressive they decide to become. They're very cocky and confident that they've got total control of the narrative through the media. So they'll just keep rolling these fake stories out and then acting according to those fake stories to do what they want. The Australian government's a classic example of that. So at what point will the Aussies rebel against it? Well, now they're vaccinating the wildlife and most people just put an angry emoji on, or a stop vaccinating the birds, or coming out with, are they going to have to wear masks, or did they have any choice in the matter? Well, of course, they're dumb animals, aren't they? They have no choice in the matter. These psychopaths are doing what they want to them.
Well, what does it mean when they're openly saying that they've released genetically modified mosquitoes into the wild? They've openly dropped genetically modified ticks into fields from drones. Where I've seen video clips of farmers who shot a drone out the sky because it was on his property, and they couldn't do anything about it because how the legislation was, yes, it was on his property, wasn't meant to be there, so he was able to do that. But they were dropping ticks. Now, if they're genetically modified and the mosquitoes are as well, what is that meaning? What is the capabilities of all that? They're injecting the wildlife. What does it mean? Because they're saying that you could get bit by these ticks, Alex, and there's something that's in this venom or whatever it is, the saliva, that will interact with your body, and then when you eat meat, it'll make you feel sick, it'll make you vomit, so you don't eat meat. Why would they do it?
Well, basically, eventually, when you look at it at this level, it becomes apocalyptic and you have to change the frame. A lot of people will just think this is sci-fi, but we know it's happening, it's creeping, it's mission creep. But, we have that theological frame again about tribulation, great tribulation. I actually believe that the solar eclipse, and you've got a lunar eclipse coming. When I look at all the indications, I think with I think we're now going to have 15 months of really severe stuff happening. It's going to kick in, and it'll be pandemonium. And I think I would associate that with the Great Tribulation, because I think it's coming. I think the persecution levels, the oppression levels, the amount of death is going to go through the roof. I think we're at that point. So, what we're supposed to be doing right now, I personally don't feel, when in Star Trek, Next Generation, the key line from the Borg was resistance is futile. We will add your distinctiveness to our own, and people got assimilated. The Borg are a great example, sci-fi example, I think, of what's coming. It's erasing distinctiveness, and it's turning everything into monochrome. And, the engineering, we're being farmed, we're being engineered. So all you can do is retain maximum agency. And that agency, for me, again, is rooted in the image of God in man. It's where the only freedom is. So, yeah, definitely connected to what you were saying about commerce. If people can extend their freedoms away from just a general sense of freedom and doing what they want, maybe civil disobedience is going to kick in at some point. But resisting, commerce. So what Carl did when he registered his car differently, so it wasn't registered, but he could still tax and MOT it and so on. Any measures that anyone can take like that are really good ways of extending the personal freedom that you've got to resisting the system. Other people will just try and live in the gaps and try and, survive in the middle of it. But a lot of people are in for a rude awakening. And, in that reel that you showed about that guy talking about the operation in Russia and what's coming in 2027, that reel went on a lot longer, and he started talking about, even the governments are talking about prepping, even the governments are talking about briefing the people about stocking up on food and water. So this stuff now, it's getting real. And I'd say I think within 15 months, we're really going to be at the precipice.
I think you could be right with that. Like I say, how blatant does it have to be before people wake up to the whole picture? It's all right arguing about council tax and bills and stuff, but as we've just seen, we're paying for everything 3 times. We're graft, we're tax, and then we're paying for it again. How are they doing that? Well, your mum and dad taught you that this is what you do. Oh, right, you've got to work hard and pay your bills, yeah, and whatever's left is yours. That's what I was taught. Make sure you pay all your bills, you register your car, you register your house, you register your kids, you stitch yourself up into this system, which is all meant to be for your benefit, but you don't know who you are. And you're just not in control of your own assets. You're registering them, but you're not in control of them. You can't be in control of them because a bloke with a wig on says, no, I'm doing this, I'm selling your house. And you say, how do you manage to, how can you sell my property? And they call armed police on you. There's a reason for that. They're operating in a completely different jurisdiction that doesn't apply, and they've got to trick you if you don't actually just comply. So if you're in a courtroom and your property's already there and the title is still clouded, it doesn't matter what you say there. It doesn't matter. You've got to bring it up to land registry, put them on notice, saying there's fraud being committed in these courts. I had 3 properties taken and sold with no signatures. Land registry said, we don't need signatures, we only need a county court stamp. That's commerce. That's they've just sold me shop that I don't have. So people have got to get their heads around that we are in a system that we've been taught to act in, so these people don't do anything wrong. And that's the issue that we've got. We're going into the courts now, telling them that they're doing wrong, but there's no proof, because the whole point to a county court hearing is you can't be heard. It's got to be on paper. It's got to say it to the judge on paper. And if the judge in case management says that's a shop, and you're arguing about it not being a shop, and you're not paying council tax because, it's not going to stand. You can't open a shop and say I'm not paying business rates. Can't do it. Council won't let you operate. Utilities, I'm not paying utilities at my shop. They'll come in, cut your water off. You can't do that. That's a human right. It's not to your shop. So if you're a shopkeeper of a shop, on paper, they'll cut you off. Now, in the past, they might not have, but as you just said, have we gone beyond the Rubicon now? Are we coming up to that precipice? Yeah,
I think we are, because if you look at the extent, the thing about it now, it's like when piranhas went, like in the Amazon. There was that movie years ago, decades ago, called Piranha, and I just remember one scene with this really big bloke, talk about fat, and he fell in the water, and it took this piranha a few minutes to completely decimate him. Sharks smell blood from a good distance away, maybe half a mile away. So I think we're at a position now, it's open season, where they realise since COVID with the masks that people were compliant enough that they would buy in, and we see what's happening now. There are still some people in denial. More footballers dropping dead. I think a 15-year-old lad in Portugal, not a 15-year-old lad, but there was a 19-year-old medalist in Taekwondo. She died a few days back. And then a guy in Portugal who played in the EFL, he dropped dead. It's happening constantly.
It's just sudden adult death syndrome, isn't it, mate? Just sudden adult death syndrome.
Yeah, I was having a debate earlier. Well, I wouldn't say it was a debate. This woman replied to this guy who claimed that the stats had gone up. And she talks about, he said something about, I'm sure all those people will come out now in their droves. And she said, well, yeah, well, they're no better than you. So I tried to pose a rational question to her. I said, well, how do you account for the increase in number? And she just said, what increase? So this is the level of it. So you've then got to prove. So then she insisted that I had to prove that there'd been an increase in frequency of football and professional sports related deaths. Now, try proving that. You have to find records where they're recorded. Who records them? The people who have no interest in recording them, there has to be somebody who collates that data. We've all seen it come through on Facebook feeds all the time. So another person's dropped dead, another person this, another person's collapsed. We see it all the time like we never used to see it. We take that as evidence that it's increasing. But if somebody doesn't document each one, put it on an official database, there's no official record, which means people like that can deny the evidence that everybody's seen and say, where's your evidence? Well, there is no evidence. Other than everybody's seen the cases, everybody knows somebody who knows somebody. People are dropping like flies all around with turbo cancers, myocarditis, strokes, the whole thing. So everybody knows from circumstantial evidence, but nobody can prove it because it's not being recorded. This means that these people can, with a straight face, say, where's your evidence? And you can't produce it because nobody's collating all this stuff because there's just too much. So the problem is, it's happening on so many fronts now. It's well known in warfare, if you're going to attack a country, what you want internal strife and external attacks, and you want external attacks on 3 or 4 different borders if possible. You'd have military attacks, cyber attacks, you'd have internal unrest to try and take something down. People now are fighting battles against corporates, even over simple things. And this is why Andy Burnham threw his sweetener in, about contracts and getting out of them with companies and so on, as if this is going to be a great victory to make it easier to get out of these things. But they've opened the door to that. It's these piranhas and these sharks now see that the public are virtually defenseless and bleeding out, fighting that many battles, juggling that many balls, spinning that many plates, however you want to put it. They're exhausted and they just don't have the bandwidth. So, yeah, exactly. So it's a total energy attack using all the systems that are in place to completely derange on every level. And people, it's like being attacked from angles that you can't see. I mean, it's in the food chain, it's everywhere. So people are under constant assault. It's in the water. I mean, now I've got a water filter. Some people buy bottled water that's got crap in it. Whenever I get cold water at my tap, it's got a film of oil over the top. So it's in the water, it's in the food, there's crap in rapeseed in everything. On every level, and these seed oils are highly carcinogenic, highly processed food everywhere. So we are being attacked at every level.
In the flour from next year, I believe.
Yeah.
Double your chances of prostate cancer.
Yeah.
This is what I mean, but this is right in your face. They're doing all this right in your face, and what that is doing to people. People can't think. We talk about brain fog. Brain fog wasn't a thing when I was growing up. You could get confused, and some people were ill like that, but there wasn't a generic thing where people were always saying that. Everybody's like that now. And there's an issue with what comes out of that mind. You know, we're talking about fruit. Where does that fruit come from? You know, you get something into your heart and then it goes to your mind and it ruminates. This is how we go forward with things. That is now being taken away. And you're talking about Andy Burnham while he was Mayor of Manchester, giving us £2 bus tickets and all that kind of stuff. And then he's the number 10 of the North and he's going to do this and he's going to do that. But there's so many questions to be asked about him. What about these rape gangs? Why did you not investigate these? Why did you vote against them? What's going on? And, you know, we've got all the other questions about money. You know, everybody's pointing at Nigel Farage and talking about a $5 million donation.
Yeah.
Angela Rayner's just had a donation. And she's talking about, oh no, my after dinner speeches, it's not a second job. That 100 grand that I earn, it's not a second job. If you earned 100 grand on a second job, do you think HMRC would be interested? Thinking you've got a second job, right?
Yeah, I think they might.
So we've got some absolute liars that, you know, we need to take into task.
As Mayor of Manchester, Andy Burnham controls a housing fund which has lent £1 billion of your money. It was meant to fix the housing crisis. So where did it go? Luxury skyscrapers in central Manchester, 24-hour concierge, dog spas, rooftop bars, 2-bed flats going for more than £400,000. Of the nearly 11,000 homes built, just 500 were affordable. While Burnham stood at podiums claiming Wigan had been forgotten by London, he was forgetting it himself. He talks about ending an era when politicians got too close to wealth. Yet he funneled £600 million to one man, Darren Whittaker, CEO of Renneker, while other developers who played by the rules couldn't get a look in. This is cronyism. Every year, Burnham jets off to Martin, a property trade show where the world's property developers compete for his attention. And Renneker is right there with him. No surprise the money kept flowing. £63 million, 62 million, 70 million, when Whittaker violated the loan terms, paying himself £42.5 million in dividends. Burnham did nothing. No investigation, no consequences, just another loan. This is what happens when politicians face zero accountability. And when a member of the public confronted Burnham live on air, he said, "You've got the wrong end of the stick. £1 billion of your money. One man. Zero accountability. This is Andy Burnham." Vote reform on Thursday, 18th of June.
No. King of the North! Now, that's a reform having a go at him, right? Because that's all these people do, isn't it? They have a go at each other. I've seen a lady on BBC saying that not many people, there will be people who won't shed a tear over Anne Widdecombe, and it's caused outrage on the BBC. How dare you say things like that? Well, you're getting them on to say these things, so you're agitating the general public.
How dare you?
You're trying to agitate the general public and get a reaction out of them. That's what the BBC always does. But, you know, at the same time, you've had a few Jimmy Saviles all around you and you don't seem to bother with that, but we're meant to believe you about this fake outrage. And Andy Burnham again, $1 billion. Just pocket change that, isn't it?
Well, yeah, exactly.
It's just
compared to Nigel, apparently.
Apparently so. So, I heard you butt in there, Taylor. How's things with you, pal?
Doing all right. Same old, same old.
You sound a bit happier than last week, mate, so I'm glad.
I mean, you know, I'm just trying to lift up the mood, is all. No point in sitting depressed about something you have no control over.
It still doesn't, but it doesn't always stop you feeling depressed. But so I'm glad.
Oh, I mean, yeah.
I'm glad you.
Go ahead.
I'm glad that you managed to take a step up, because sometimes when we're feeling like that, we drop to our knees and we stay there. And you know, the factor is we've just got to crawl a bit on our knees before we can get back up. So you just got to keep going, mate.
Pretty much.
What have you got anything for us, Taylor?
What's it called?
First of all,
So on the local scene, there was another Fetty attack. There was a nice little compilation video done by somebody who works in the area in Seattle, going around to all the different to the three main parts of Seattle that are just completely run over with Fetties, if you know what I mean.
ran over with what?
Fetties.
Feddies.
Fentanyl junkies.
Oh, right. Right, I'm with you now.
Fentanyl junkies, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just it's like we have these parks where kids should be playing, and they're overrun with tents and people with freaking mental disease. There's the guy he was walking with his cameraman, and then some dude took his shirt off. Some black guy took his shirt off and started running after him with a knife.
Yeah,
There was
it's bonkers, man.
another guy freaking they shine their even at nighttime. You see them in the forest. There was a burned body. Like, what the hell?
Yeah. Things aren't looking good anywhere. It's we were just talking about. I don't know if you saw the video, Taylor, that played. I think it was before you came on, where the government in the UK are looking of. We can only call them manoeuvres next year for the general public to participate in preparation for possible war with Russia. So things like stockpiling food and things like that. Now we can live. They're gonna teach us next year, Taylor. So they're programming us, they're pre-programming us ready for something that's coming. Andy Burnham we've given some stick to tonight because all this deflection he said in the media this week, the reason that our fuel prices are going up is because of you lot, because of Trump having a war with Iran, and yet Andy allowed them to attack Iran from our bases. So, we've got a load of bollocks that's being spoken about on every side. If you look at the Russian stuff, the factor is that Russia's talking about that the UK will have to pay. What does that mean? If everybody's really truly against each other, so Russia and Ukraine and NATO is against Russia, and if that's all true, and then Israel and America are hating everybody else on that side, as in Iran, Iraq, Venezuela, Turkey, all that stuff. If they're all hating each other, then this is just going to be in one massive mess. And yet, we can see the intricate design and the threads that go through from all these bloodlines that have been involved in all these nations forever. And it's just what's always happened. I mean, did you watch House of Cards, Taylor?
No.
If you ever get a chance to watch House of Cards, just look at how your government actually works, because it's spot on. I know Kevin Spacey's a bit of a nonce, but he acts as himself in House of Cards, and the way it's portrayed of what really truly goes on in politics, it's perfect. If people watched it and got an understanding, it's the same. We used to have a comedy series in the 80s called Yes Minister, which the minister in that series then became Prime Minister. So it became Yes Prime Minister. And as Prime Minister, he's asking his secretary, well, can't we do all this? And he just looks and says, really, Prime Minister? Really? That would be helping people. And it's like, well, are we not here to do that? Really? Come on. Surely. This is what people are like. And what happens is, I think that because we've seen it with, Coronation Street, when they campaigned for Deirdre to be released from prison and all that kind of stuff, we know that people's minds get taken over by this. And we know who's controlling all of it. So we're all being pre-programmed. You mentioned earlier, Alex, about the climate change weapons. You know, the arguments that people have had over this, and now it's blatant that they're saying that they're doing this. It's also very strange that in the middle of August, after the eclipse, you know, I'd not been out for a walk because I was away house sitting. So when I went back on my walk, after a week after the eclipse, walking through the woods, and it's like autumn. There's just dead leaves everywhere. Oh, it's because it's been really hot and sunny and dry and stuff. Well, it's been that before, and I've still walked through woods and it's been green. You know, this isn't dry land in these woods, so you can't put it down to that. So what is it that's going on? What's being sprayed? What's changed? Have our seasons been changed? It's looking like it, because, you know, if we look at the new year, you'd normally put new year with spring, new life, all that. No. We celebrate New Year right in the middle of dead winter. When everything's dead, that's when we do it. Because everything's been changed. It then becomes tradition. So if as far back as you want to go, when people did it right, it's only got to take a generation or 2 generations for it to change. A study I was doing today, Alex, about the kings of Israel, 19 kings were all failures. Everybody, none of them kept God's covenant. You know, if they got rid of Baal, they kept the calves. They worshipped the calves. If they got rid of the Baal, it was keeping something, and then it all become tradition. And then after the kings, all we had was tradition, and they argued about that. So if they've got it wrong, we have to go back to the origin as early as we possibly can. Fortunately, with the technology, information has been able to give us all this, but you've got to have the inkling, and you know, there's not a lot of people got the inkling because we're too busy trying to pay bills, and it's, you know, it's a vicious circle, and you're trying to tell people as they zoom past you, and then they come back and call your names and then zoom off again. Information just never gets passed, and then when it does drop, the first reaction is, well, what can you do? Well, I don't know, but should we not all start coming together and seeing what we can do, how we can articulate it? If we just said, right, on this day we're doing nothing, let's cause money issues. Let's start going supporting our local farmers. Can we go into the fields, help the farmers to grow our own crops again? I don't know. But somehow we've got to get people with ideas to come together with people who can make those ideas come to fruition. But if you've retarded people's minds, the fruit that you're going to bear is going to be minimal. Yeah,
I mean, interestingly, I sometimes do this at the end in the summation, but I'm going to read a bit of the Bible now because I think it's particularly pertinent. You know, mentioning these eclipses, I said the other week, this is in Joel in the Old Testament, the prophet, at chapter 3, talking about the sun being turned to darkness and the moon being turned to blood. This happens, like I said, you know, it's the eclipse cycle happens every year. So, you know, there's no great, you know, shakes there. Usually it's partial eclipse. But other signs and evidences align with what's going on in the world are interesting. But I'm just going to read this other bit from Revelation. And there was a war in heaven, Michael and his angels waging war with the dragon. And the dragon and his angels waged war, and they were not strong enough. And there was no longer a place found for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who is called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brethren has been thrown down, who accuses them before our God day and night. And they overcame him because of the blood of the Lamb and because of the word of their testimony. And they did not love their life even to death. For this reason, rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, knowing that he has only a short time. I think, that's got several applications. It had an original application, but it also has an application because the next chapter is chapter 13, where you get the incarnation of the beast, of the dragon into the two beasts, and the beast from the land has the horns like a lamb but speaks like a dragon. So you can see there's this principle that this dragon is again, it's been manifested through empire and through a particular human representative. So this dragon comes down through systems and into its agents and so on. So, to me, this is what we're dealing with now. We're talking about this time of great wrath. He knows he has a little time, and he's very angry.
Well, that's the point being when you say that Michael and his angels fought. Well, when he's cast down, that's when Jesus at the cross, it is finished. He's cast out of the first heaven because he can't accuse us before God anymore. So the battle in the second heaven's been going with Michael. Michael's then going to stand up. That's going to be silence in heaven. And then he's going to be cast back into the earth because Christ cast him out and he couldn't go and accuse us anymore. But we are accused because his minions use us to accuse ourselves. Bloody hell, I've battered myself accusing myself of different things over the years until you actually understand that maybe they're not your thoughts then. Maybe they're not quite your thoughts. Maybe they're being used to trigger those things. We had a conversation about triggers in fellowship through the week, how different things, and it's not that specific individual that's doing that to you. It's the spiritual warfare, it's the principalities that are using that as an outside to trigger what they know that is already inside. And I think it's only that spiritual understanding and joining these scriptures, because you've got Daniel 12 there telling you that there's going to be a time when Michael stands up, there'll be a time like there's never been, never will be again. And you just said he's angry. That's when he's coming back. That's the great tribulation.
Yeah.
It's the wrath of Satan who hates us. But people go, no, that's the wrath of God and we won't be here for that. So poof, we're gone. And I don't know how you can derive that from the scripture without a belief of reading into it, because I didn't have any of them and it just comes straight out the page at you, Alex. So you've got Old Testament, New Testament pointing at each other and saying this is exactly what's happening. This is what the world will look like. It's so right on that precipice. And with the earthquakes and
they've been severe.
Yeah, really, really bad. And it because of all that, it made me look at Mount St Helens when this is like round your area, isn't it, Taylor, at Washington State? When that went in 1980, it was like all the activity that was going on, but they couldn't tell when it was going to go off, and they'd done a 6 mile radius, and it was never going to be enough. And a fellow who was reporting on it died there, and his last 5 words was spoken out. You're going back to then, and we're also looking at weapons that can be used to trigger these things. But those are all conspiracy theories, aren't they?
Well, the thing is, we know, don't we? It's called Dragonfire. It's manufactured in Bolton, actually. It isn't on the A666. I used to think it was, but it's not that far away. And I live just off the A666 from Bolton to Darwin. So it's called Dragonfire, and that's the description in Revelation 13, that this beast is able to make fire come down from heaven to earth in the presence of men. So if you look at these so-called wildfires that came, and then set all these houses on fire, we mentioned last week directed energy weapons. Well, Dragonfire could do that. That would fulfill Revelation 13. We've got 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the great delusion. So many people still buying into it, can't see, like living in a hologram where you can't reality test. So then you've got, the man of lawlessness is revealed in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 before the end. But then you have this great tribulation. There are signs in the heavens, and so this pair of eclipses, the next one's the lunar eclipse.
Yeah.
It's a total. It'll be turned to blood. The sun was turned to darkness at the last one because all the videos were doing the reels. Say again, pal.
Isn't that lunar eclipse round Feast of Trumpets time?
It's
September-ish.
No, literally, we're only a few days away from it because there's a 2-week gap because it's a full moon and a new moon, right? So the first one, the solar eclipse, is a new moon. So the sun is darkened. 2 weeks later, total lunar. So you're getting that blood-like hue. So yeah, we're not that far away. That is so when Joel 3 says that those two things will happen. But if you look at the position of the nodal axis, that's what's very significant. It's in Leo, Leo Aquarius, and it moved from Virgo Pisces. And so the nodes take 18 months to move through signs. So they just changed recently. And originally, 18 months prior to this, you had the South Node, which is the past, in Virgo. Virgo is the Virgin. The Virgin from the past, you move from the South Node to the North Node. The North Node is in Pisces, the fish. We've just been in the age of Pisces, the age of the fish. So it's the Virgin of the past bringing forth the sun into the present. But when the nodal axis shifts, it moves from that to Leo Aquarius. Leo is a king. The South Node is the king from the past moves to the North Node Aquarius, which is the community. It's the kingdom. So the king from the past comes up to take up residence in his kingdom. That's what's coming. So there's a few other things which I'm not going to get into. So when it talks about being signs in the heavens, it's all these different things coming together celestially. It's not like when people read it in scripture, they go, oh, a person looked up in the sky and saw something. Well, yeah, you do see eclipses, but there's other stuff that you don't see. That was what the Magi knew. Matthew's gospel, they knew, they saw, they recognized, they were prognosticators. They saw the celestial patterns. These patterns are all panning out. And if you look at the Great Delusion, you look at this increase, you look at what happened in them houses, 37 of them, that fits Dragonfire. Everything's aligned. It's just the man of lawlessness. It's that revelation. How the earthquakes are happening. So it's not the fact that these things have always happened, but it's when they happen in a particular configuration that you need to become aware. And Jesus says, when you see these things beginning to happen, pay attention. So he's not saying you won't see them. For those paying attention, you'll see them. Then prepare, put oil in your lamp. It's all a parable of the wise and foolish virgins.
Well, that's the point, isn't it? The thief coming like a thief in the night is for the ones who aren't watching. If you're watching these signs, pay attention, put oil in your lamp. If you don't, then he's just going to turn up and you're going to go, oh, hey, let me get some oil. Yeah, it's not going to work out. Local, August 27th, 28th, it's looking. Early morning, 28th, it starts at 33 minutes past 3, peaking at 12 minutes past 5, allegedly.
Oh, it starts at 3:33 a.m.
Yeah, that's British Standard. So UK, Western Europe is early morning on the 28th. Tail, you're East Coast, aren't you?
West Coast. West
Coast, sorry. Yours will be 12 minutes past 8.
Okay.
In the evening till 12 minutes past 9. So your blood moon will be at that time, while ours are going to be at 3:30 in the morning. Interesting time, 33 minutes past 3.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Very, very, very interesting. And none of that is coincidental. Normally, I mean, I've been watching. I don't track these cycles. There was a time when I became really well versed in astrology, and I kind of wondered why it was. It was a phase, but I've mapped it to political events going back to the Mongol raids, Genghis Khan, everything. All the cycles, all the planetary stuff works. So even though I don't use it now, I see it. I can't unsee it. I know it. I know. I've seen so much stuff in pattern. It's ridiculous. So I know how it all fits together. And in that sense, those patterns reflect God's creation, because he's built the blueprint into the very nature of reality, just like he's built into the human body self-healing. We don't really need external miracles because he made the body to last. And when we realign, that's where healing comes from. You know, but again, we externalize, we supernaturalize miracles because, you know, it sells newspapers, doesn't it? But at the end of the day, it's all part of God's design. So if you have eyes to see, you see these things. That's what the unique configuration is here. Things are different. And when you look at that and compare to what's happening on the earth, it's got to a level of insanity now. They are poisoning the seas. I mean, look at what's happening in Australia. It talks in Revelation as well about a third of sea life dying. Now, it doesn't say how and why, but obviously the stuff that they're doing, the claims that they're making, these things are happening on a grand scale. Yes, a lot of it's manufactured, but they're actively doing it. So wherever it's purportedly going to come from Revelation and other places, you can see that all the evidences are there. Natural disasters, man-made stuff, the wrath of the enemy who hates God's creation. He's destroying wildlife. These Australians, they're vaccinating these rare species, cockatoos, you know. I mean, who hates the diversity and beauty of God's creation more than Satan? Exactly. Who would want to destroy it?
Honestly, everything, the human genome, everything is corrupted. They've actually done as in the days of Noah. It's a solar eclipse that's occurring on the 12th of September. It begins at sundown on the 11th. So it's a solar eclipse on the... It's
very... now that's interesting. You very rarely... Big bit right. Based on the positioning of the node Laxis, you usually only have 2 eclipses in a sequence. But if that's the case, it'll be a partial. But even then, that's 3 eclipses. That's almost like double indemnity. Normally you get a lunar and a solar. Very rare that both are total. But both of the expressions of these, at least, even if they're not technically, the solar one, I think, wasn't technically total, but it was such a big coverage that it might as well have been. And if you've got a third one in September, that is very interesting.
I think, as you said, Alex, as we go into next year, I think 15 months down the line, we're gonna have a picture. Wonder who'll like it and who won't.
Well, the point about this is as well, people see it as like really bad. Obviously, I mean, nobody's voting for this if they can and say, oh yeah, bring on all this crap. And people see it as an expression of evil, which there is a manifestation of evil agency beneath of this. But God is in charge. And what he does, he uses those things as a last chance for people to wake up. So that which the enemy intended for destruction and evil, the Lord uses to shape people. The question is, will they wake up or will they stick their heads in the sand? Well, that's going to be down to them.
Certainly is. Well, we're coming up to... We've got 10 minutes left. I know you've not been on giving us much, Taylor, but before you wrap up, tell us any other bits that you've got for us, mate. Because I do have to tell you, I had a couple of messages about the outro songs that are played and the pictures, and people had noticed that on the picture, Taylor, that the pictures that you're on, the armour that you're wearing, you've got a cross, but it's not lit up like mine and Alex's. And people wondered whether that was it was for a reason, and it was because of how the show's been moving on. Now you've got that point now where you've done all your research. You know what the plan is there, but now you're wanting to see these other things that are not quite there yet. So you're not quite sure, and you've not looked at God and the Bible yet. But obviously, being around me and Alex, you get the odd tendencies, and it's because it's been noticed by people who have been watching how your questioning has changed. So I wanted to tell you that bit about it as well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So, what have you got for us this week? What are you planning on doing on your show? Any guests yet or whatever? And tell people where they can find you again, mate.
Well, still, unfortunately, I haven't been able to see any kind of guests. I haven't heard any news about guests or anything like that. I've been trying, but you know how it is. But I'm just gonna be doing the same old, playing stuff on my channel, trying to talk to people, trying to give out information if possible. Just doing the usual stuff. I hope
do you do
that
it live? Sorry, Taylor, do you do it live or record it?
Sometimes I record, sometimes I go live. It depends on what I'm doing. If I'm reading a book, it's gonna be pre-recorded. I can't do it live because I have to take breaks and stuff like that, or push pause if I hear my mother nearby.
Fair enough. It's just if you do ever go live, post the link in the group, and then I can share it, because me and Alex were talking about it. You've got stuff to share, but you don't use social media. I know you've had trouble with Facebook, but if you put it in the chat, we'll share it for you, mate, and hopefully give you a little bit of light.
Yeah, and I appreciate whenever you do that, definitely.
No worries. So,
and I'm going to try to do that more if I can.
Just give your stuff out, mate, then where we can find you.
Okay, so my Rumble channel is the Raconteurs Report, same as my Twitter account, and my Gmail is chimpyskippy@gmail.com. I usually will upload me reading stuff on my Rumble channel. That's usually where I'm at. And I also upload watch parties and stuff like that, where we just watch documentaries or talks from people. It really depends, honestly, like what I'm in the mood for. I usually try to play longer stuff because obviously shorter stuff doesn't get all the views. But I try to be diverse as possible when it comes to topics that I cover or that I show information of on my channel. I just recently did one on on old world archaeology and structures, so there's that. I also did one on the moon landings, which personally is not really a topic that interests me very much. But as I said, I try to be diverse in the topics that I cover. So there's that.
You're not too fussy on fiction, then.
It just depends, honestly. It's like my care more is for geopolitics and stuff like that, rather than stuff like, oh, did we land on the moon, or what shape is the Earth and all that. Like
that's your problem. That's why you don't get invited to barbecues like me anymore, mate. Because you want to talk about geopolitics. People don't want your opinion, mate. They'll give you theirs, but they don't really want to know your opinion.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's like they can give it, but they can't take it.
Exactly. Well, thanks for coming on, mate. Hopefully, get some information off you this week, and I can share it for you.
Yeah.
But, just hang about in the green room, and we'll pray out with you, mate.
All right, appreciate that.
Okay.
Nice one.
And God bless everyone in the audience. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like and subscribe button and all that good stuff.
Cheers, Taylor.
God bless, mate.
God bless.
So, in summing up, my friend.
Right. Well, it's become a bit of a tradition when I'm going to read something from the Bible, because I think it just nails it on. Most people think, from a Christian point of view, that you're reading the words of Jesus, or you're reading the Apostle Paul, and they'll get into debates about oh, Paul corrupted the gospel, or is it the same gospel that Jesus talked about? But there's a rich tradition that led to Jesus, that Jesus himself had internalized, was a part of, and that in many ways he transformed and brought to life. So I'm just going to read a few verses and from 2 chapters in the book of Proverbs, because it's really relevant, I think, to where we're at, what we're looking at. Right at the beginning in Proverbs 1. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to discern the sayings of understanding, to receive instruction in wise behavior, righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the naive, to the youth knowledge and discretion. A wise man will hear and increase in learning, and a man of understanding will acquire wise counsel. To understand the proverb and a figure, the words of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. And then chapter 3, verse 12 verses. My son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. Do not let kindness and truth leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart, so you will find favor and good repute in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your body and refreshment to your bones. Honor the Lord from your wealth and from the first of all your produce, so your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine. My son, do not reject the discipline of the Lord, or loathe his correction. For whom the Lord loves, he reproves, even as a father, the son in whom he delights. I think that sums it up.
He always seems to say it better than we do, doesn't he?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Spot on.
We can look at all of this. We can look at towards Andy Burnham and say that he's leading us down to something or another. But there's a bigger picture. And for some reason, we always see the same set of people that don't control anything. They don't have a majority control of everything for the size of the people that they are. They claim to be part of something that they might not be. Jesus mentioned them in synagogue of Satan. We see all of this. We see these Noahide laws. We see all the religions now saying that there's more than one way to God. Where does all this come from? We can say that it always comes down to Satan, but we do have agents, don't we, Alex? We have agents and agency.
Yeah.
And there are agents down here. And
there are.
Maybe it's time that we just look and turn the light on. We might not be breaking their system, but let's turn the light on and watch the cockroaches run. Hopefully see you next week, guys. Good night, God bless.
See you later, guys. Bye for now.
Or they say blackness does not mean physical blackness. Blackness means it's a spiritual level, a spiritual inferiority. So that's the first thing. It happens to be that Jewish law permits the enslavement of any non-Jew, white or black. That's another question which got raised. But that has nothing to do with racism. That's just a heter that we are allowed to enslave non-Jewish populations.
Three voices on the air, parse passing through the noise. Webby, Alex, and Taylor, bringing clarity and choice. Unpacking the world through a biblical lens, where the truth begins and the conditioning ends. At the world, they see the symptoms and the fruit, naming every case but never digging to the root. A system built on managing the damage and the grief, pharmakeia selling remedies that never bring relief. They call conviction illness and identity a plight, telling you what you are, not what you could be in the light. Christ doesn't manage what rules within the mind. He breaks open the prison and leaves the chains behind. Will you find the truth where human systems fail? When man-made institutions build a quiet modern jail. Your earthly structures fracture, but they aren't your final guide. Turn your heart to heaven where the truth and grace reside. 12 years of school and the lessons never stop. Conditioned for obedience from the bottom to the top. Bells ring, you sit down, ask permission just to move. Traded curiosity to fit into the groove. It's not about the knowledge, it's the habit that they make. Training you to crave approval, fear every mistake. From the classroom to the shift, 40 years inside the frame. Work, consume, repeat, and give the leash another name. Signs in the heavens, eclipses in the sky. Prophecies unfolding while the world passes by. They wave the magic wand and call the truth a mind trick. Distracting from the fire while the time keeps ticking quick. Trading principle for pennies, voting just for gold. Politics can't